react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home. Begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying danger in defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 First round, fifth round, final round. Oh, yeah. First round, fifth round, final round. No, 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 no. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a bus. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a bus. Oh, oh, oh,
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and this is In Time. And I think we're getting someone joining us. We will get to our guests shortly in just a moment. But for those of you who are new here, what we do, this is actually not a Ukrainian channel. This is a news show. But something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize is that. And I'm going to ask Commander to mute if you can for a minute. One thing that a lot of people I think don't realize is not every story has two sides. Some have 15 sides. Some have only one. I think when we talk about Ukraine, we have to be honest and call it what it is: genocide. And I think when we're talking about genocide, there is only one side. So we may be a news show, but we all felt very strongly that this was a story that A, was not being covered, and B, we had an obligation to, in whatever way we could, try to help and to have open and honest discussions about why this kind of thing is important. A lot of people don't know, but in Nazi Germany, there were a number of Nazis who did not agree with committing genocide against the Jews. Do you know what those Nazis were called? Nazis. On an issue like this, it's not you're for us or against us, but standing aside and not doing anything and not participating is tantamount to being involved. Now, I'm very proud of this show, and for those of you who don't know, again, what we do breaking news. When Prigozhin invaded Russia, we were on top of that before any other major network news. We beat Associated Press, Reuters, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of them, to the point where we had people coming into our live chat, and as we were showing Prigozhin going deeper into Russia, they were like, this has to be fake, this can't be real. Welcome to In Time. We're supported by our community. Our community builds the channel and helps decide what we take interest in. And all of us have decided that this is one of the single most important things happening on the planet today. We're community supported. So we have a patron. If you're interested in that, please subscribe. Don't have to if you don't want to. You can become a member. You can just join us on the Discord and watch, observe, learn. That's what it's there for. Or you can participate, drop stories that you think are important and that we should cover, and engage with us. We are, again, a community channel. Our guest today, when I first met him, I was in a difficult position. Russia had just invaded Ukraine, and I'm already a bit of a misanthrope, and I already don't really believe too much in the kindness of human beings. I used to, but I've seen too much by this point. And we had this gentleman on, and he was one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. And he's in a fucking war zone, for crying out loud, defending his homeland and seeing horrors that I've never had to be subjected to. And the more Ukrainian people I met, the more my faith in humanity was restored. And I realized, yeah, there's always going to be Russias out there that are going to be bullies and want absolutely everything on the fucking planet that they can get their hands on. And with luck, there will always be people like Ukrainians who are fighting them with courage that I could not even fathom. And they're actually fighting our fight, because if Ukraine were to fall, there's a lot of other countries that are next. So this is all hands on deck in my view. And I told Starsky, maybe he remembers, that it was talking to him that restored my sense of humanity and my belief that there are good people to fight that darkness. So let's get going.
Hi, this is Penn. Penn Jillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic. Smaller guy next to me, he does magic too. He doesn't talk that much. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you to In Time. Welcome you all to In Time with Nick. Love you all. Peace. Go get him, Nick.
Hello, hello, welcome everybody, and welcome back. It is so appropriate, our first real guest coming back, Operator Starsky. Operator Starsky, thank you so much for coming. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing so well, my friend, and I literally feel as if I'm like back in Kiev 2022. I believe. Seriously, it's been a while. And by the way, what you said about restoring faith in humanity, it actually works both ways, because you also motivate, and you did motivate me, and you keep motivating me to fight Russian disinformation and share information with people even to this day. And I hope it will not stop, because we need to motivate each other. It's something really, really important nowadays.
I couldn't agree more. I saw a very motivating stream yesterday that I'm not going to talk about, because it was, I think, difficult for a lot of people, and we're we'll save it. I know the shills are going to talk about it tonight. So, and Dick will, if he can't drop it in the live chat, I'm hoping that Titan can drop a link to the shills tonight, and also to Starsky stream later. You're going to be a busy guy, it's absolutely amazing to watch, and thank you very much. It is a genuine privilege to be able to do anything to help and support in this way. You mentioned misinformation, and I think that that's something that Americans do not take seriously. And I have as proof of that the fact that Trump was elected president. Commander, you're still muted. I'm reminding you so that if you would like to unmute, and you can, would love to. One of the reasons the reason I have Commander on these shows is because I like to pretend like I know military stuff, but I really don't. So I'm just like, well, I could tell you all about the history of modern warfare in Russia, but I'm generous, so I'm going to let this guy do all the talking. And, just casually agree and go, yeah, I think Lance has that right. I mean, I wouldn't agree with everything he said, but he was pretty, he's getting up there. But when it comes to misinformation, I've got to tell you, well, I do the same thing with that too. So that's why Lance is here. And he's going to help hopefully clue us in as to what's going on. So we're going to talk, I think, a lot about your new business. So I'd like to dedicate the first half of the show to what's going on in Ukraine right now, and the second half of the show as to why you made an interesting choice as to what it is you're going to do and how that affects Ukraine and really the rest of the world. So we've got here a map. You guys, speaking of, like, we're all going to get flashbacks now because it's like, here's the map. We've done this before. So, and I think everybody already knows that there's been an incursion into Russia. My understanding is Russian forces have managed to sort of push it back a little bit, but they're still not organized enough to have any significant impact. So, Starsky, could you tell us what's going on right now, and if there's anywhere on the map that you'd like to go to? And Commander, if you've got any ideas, let's find out what's going on in Ukraine right now.
Absolutely. Speaking of Kursk, there was, from the most recent updates that we can talk about, there was a collapse of the Russian flank near 𝐒𝐬𝐜𝐿, where basically Ukrainian troops managed to, that is, again, according to the information coming from the ground, and I hope that it will be reflected very, very soon on the deep state map as well. Their flank near 𝐒𝐬𝐜𝐿 collapsed, which is promising. At the same time, of course, Russian troops attempted to push Ukrainian troops back. And from what we know, they only had several tactical successes in that area, but not much, because Ukrainian troops are building fortifications, and our positions there are pretty much secure. We had some really promising update from Vovchansk, where, as we know, that is not on the territory of Russia. In Vovchansk, Ukrainian troops managed to push Russian invaders from the industrial zone and secure the area, which again shows that Russians apparently have some big issues with their manpower. At this moment, the issues are not critical for the front line, but critical specifically for this area, because Russians were fighting for Vovchansk for many, many months, as we can see, and they still keep failing there. So Ukrainian troops performed successful counterattack and pushed Russians away from the industrial zone. We will keep our eye on the updates from this area, because it's something really important. We know that Russians lost several hundred tanks and quite a few armored vehicles and utility vehicles, also while performing those absolutely useless attacks on the Ukrainian positions in Vovchansk. and these didn't bring them any significant result as of today, because apparently on their way to the world dominance, they stumbled upon a town of Ovchansk and stuck there. That's all I can say about the situation in Ukraine and in Kursk, because currently I'm working on a absolutely different project, and I don't follow the news much, but those are the messages that I received from my guys.
And I know Lance, since Lance is covering it, and I've been out of it for a little while, as you know, too, so I'm slightly behind the times. I will say, if I recall, didn't a friend of yours basically calculate that if Russia had just taken a snail and launched it towards Kyiv, that the snail would have reached Kyiv like 3 months ago or something like that?
Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful snail theory. And if you give me just 20 minutes, I will find it for you.
Okay, find the snail theory. What I'd like to do, I will go to Lance in a minute, and he can hopefully expand on that. I am interested in also that breakthrough that you mentioned on the left here, so we're going to get into that. Before we do, oh my God, we've had some spectacular support already, which I really appreciate. Dunk ONU23 has become a member. Thank you. Our members are really what keep us going. So, thank you very much for that. Blonde Bombsheller then added a gift of 5 memberships. That's extraordinarily generous. We really appreciate it on behalf of all of us on End Time. Thank you very much for that help and support. Dunk on you, actually, I guess. Okay, you know what? Sometimes in my head things arrive by freight. $20 super chat. 𝐒𝐨𝐿 Ukraini. Thank you so much for that super chat, and again for your continued support. That really does help us. And gifted another 5 memberships. So thank you all who are learning. And as I said, Starsky is just a part of it, and we've been proud to have on Brandon Mitchell, who we're going to be inviting back. Also, Brigadier General Benjamin Hodges, who we were supposed to have 2 additional interviews with. Unfortunately, those were canceled, but we're going to be reaching out to him and bringing him back. And it's going to be my delight to see if I can get Hodges and Starsky on the same stream. I've been warned by YouTube that something that awesome would just like crash the whole system, but I am willing to try it and find out. I will take the risk, especially since YouTube keeps demonetizing us. Suzanne Melendi, new member, also thank you, and another gift from Linda H1 membership gift. So thank you so much for your support, guys. Like I said, it's what keeps, this isn't just to say, it's what keeps the channel going. So we really appreciate it. Commander McMillan, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. I'm keeping the mic muted because it's feeding time at the zoo, and the doggies get excited and make a lot of noise. Oh,
well, you and I both know that people are more interested in the dogs than they are in either of us. Yeah. So I've focused in here, but I don't know where you'd like to start. What is the situation? I'd like to start sort of tactically. What is the situation? And then strategically, the only thing I do know is that about 2 hours ago, I think the U.S. approved the sale of, or the gift, I believe, the transfer of long-range weapons to Ukraine. Having said that, they have not, to the best of my knowledge, changed their position that they cannot be used. However, I think it was someone at the Department of State has, State Secretary Blinken has said that Putin's comments on the nuclear threat, what he would do if the U.S. were to allow Ukraine to do deep strikes into Russia, he called those totally irresponsible. So once again, I obviously know a great deal more about what's going on. That's not the sum total of my knowledge. Absolutely not at all. I know lots more, but I'm a magnanimous host, so why don't I pass that on to you?
Okay. Yeah, well, since you brought it up, we'll address that real quickly. The whole issue of using Western-provided weapons deep inside Russia. I think we're seeing some gradual movement in the direction of releasing the restrictions to some extent. The U.S. has already said that they're okay with the Ukrainians using British, French-provided Storm Shadow missiles against targets deep inside Russia. It makes no sense to allowing that and then saying, no, but you can't use ATACMS inside Russia. So I think we're going to see eventually that evolve into all these weapons being released for deep strikes. But it's one of those, it's going to take time, and everybody's being ultra cautious about both. As for activities going on at the front, we talked about the Kursk salient. I think the best way to describe it is the Ukrainians are being cautious and making gains in the area. Russian counterattacks are being conducted, particularly on the western side of that salient, but they're not having a lot of success in doing that. It also appears that the Ukrainians may have started a second thrust that we see there, which are centered on. I love to speculate about double encirclements because I think they're one of the coolest aspects of warfare, but who knows if that's going to develop into one. But if you
what is a double encirclement?
Okay, so if you see the two purple portions, those are the Ukrainian force grains. Now imagine if both of those kind of swept inwards towards one another and created a pocket of the pink, the Russian zone there. Think about how many Russian troops are trapped in that area. That's called a double encirclement, because you had two arms encircle it like a big bear hug, so to speak. Those troops are then, the Russian troops in that encirclement are cut off from their supplies, their ability to maneuver is severely impacted, etc. And typically they either end up getting in a position where they're forced to surrender, or they fight to the last man, but they're getting increasingly weak and ineffective at being able to conduct any sort of defense. So from that perspective, yeah, it could develop into that, but I don't know if it will. Double encirclements are extremely difficult to pull off because to a trained military eye, you can see what may be developing in that direction, and you try to avoid it. The interesting side effect is if it's developed.
Yeah.
Sorry. The interesting side effect is that if it is developing in that direction, then you're kind of compelling the Russians in this case to pull out of that area that's being threatened. So you get quick gains for relatively minimal cost. That's
so instead of an encirclement, the people in this area right here may actually just completely withdraw to prevent those kinds of casualties and losses, thus allowing this entire area to turn purple.
Right, correct. The issue there is that when you have an authoritarian leader who has to look like a strong man and doesn't really give a damn about how many of his troops die, they issue hold at all costs orders, and they end up creating a pocket and losing more than they would have otherwise. So I would not expect the Russians to pull back. We have not seen them do that in cases where encirclements were threatened.
You had also mentioned, I believe, to the east and to the west, there are a few interesting things. A power plant, for example, that helps supply the trains going to the front. Right. Is that accurate? So where is that, and is it possible that they're just sort of using the new?
Take the larger of the two purple areas and go to the northeast of that. Further, okay. Somewhere up in that area is where we're talking about the nuclear power.
Okay.
So it's theoretically in a position where it could be attacked, but right now it doesn't look like that's the direction the attack is headed. Let me deal with some unruly puppies here. You guys.
All right. All right, so you go deal with the, and at some point you are going to have to like just show them on camera, because if you don't, A, I don't think it's an in-time show, and B, I think we get demonetized just for there. They are. Oh, you know what? We're gonna. Can I wait? Yeah, here we go. Here's what we're gonna do. Just there we go. Yep, there. I'm fully aware that we are now watching the stars of the show. It's got very little to do with Starsky, myself, or anyone else. All right. So you were saying?
Okay. The puppy offensive has been addressed.
Okay.
Anyway, I hate to say it this way because it sounds so negative, but in a lot of ways, I think the Ukrainian offensive in the first sector has kind of attenuated. I think they're going to make some additional gains, but it's not going to be anything near as dramatic as we saw early on. The main effect this offensive has had, and it's a big one, is that it has drawn forces out of the Russian offensive, which is further called the Avdiivka directions. That's the town, the base of the salient that the Russians are developing down there. Let's see if I can spot that. So you see where that big blob of red there? Yeah, in that area. No, up to the northeast there, all that stuff.
So the Russians are pulling troops out of this area in order to try to slow down or stop the incursion.
Correct. So what's been going on is the Russians been conducting that slow, plodding, extremely costly offensive down there. It started with Bakhmut and it went to Avdiivka. It's gone from several other minor towns going in that direction. They're making gains, but they lose close to 1,000 troops a day sometimes in trying to make that ground. And they've been committing their best forces to that offensive. That's the key thing, I think, that's the takeaway, is until recently, that's where all the best trained, best equipped formations are being sent. And then Kursk offensive happened, and suddenly it was all, oh gosh, we've got to do something. So they stopped sending reinforcements to the main offensive and started sending them to Kursk, and those weren't working. So now they're pulling troops out of the southern sector to go up and try to deal with Kursk, which in turn is slowing down to not just to crawl, but to non-progress in the main Avdiivka offensive direction.
So we also know that there have been significant drone strikes in Moscow. Now, one of Putin's advantages has been that he controls all media. And basically, if he says there have been no drone strikes, then there have been no drone strikes. Having said that, it's a little hard to deny it when the side of an apartment complex gets kind of blasted off.
Well,
so
it's even worse than that. I mean, they hit a big munitions depot that's kind of in Moscow. And, you know, you can't stand, it's like Baghdad Bob, you know, there are no American tanks anywhere near Baghdad, and you're looking out the window watching them drive by. In this case, you know, there are no drone strikes occurring near Moscow, and you're watching these giant explosions in the background. It's just ridiculous.
How long do you think he can sustain that?
What? Continuing the lies? The Russians have been continuing that same pack of lies since well into the Tsarist area. So,
yeah, but against the people is one thing. Although with cell phone technology, I don't know. I guess I was maybe cautiously optimistic that people would realize that the war is far bigger than it has been explained to them. But you're right. You know, it's sort of operant conditioning.
I find it fascinating that there are still occasionally you see some streamers, Russian streamers, who are doing man in the street interviews. And they talk to people, and what do you think? And they very carefully word their questions so that they can't be seen as being anti-government or anything. They don't want to get arrested. And they still do get arrested, but it's hard to pin a charge on them because they're so careful. But they ask things, like, how do you think our glorious army is doing defeating these evil Ukrainians? And you can tell that they're reluctant to respond because they don't know how to respond. And when they do respond, they say, oh yes, our glorious army is winning. Victory will be achieved in a matter of hours, kind of thing. But you can tell watching these, looking at the expressions of the people who were being interviewed, A, they're scared about responding to these kind of questions, and B, they don't believe a single word that's coming out of their mouths as they're talking to the reporter. So I think the key question isn't so much, do the Russian people believe this garbage anymore? I think for the most part, they don't. They have suspicions and doubts, but they have no idea what the real situation is. But you're not going to get any groundswell movement from the bottom to stop the war. It's just not the way the Russian mind thinks. They need somebody from the top to take charge and lead them. That's one of the key things we've seen going on since before the start of the war, is that anybody in the inner circle that even has a mere whiff of suggestion of being a potential rival for Putin falls out of a window.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the way they do business there. So Putin's going to stay in power until somehow, somewhere, someone is able to start a movement that throws him out. And it has to be a real quick kind of operation, because the longer it goes on, the faster and more effectively the security services respond to it.
So I think this dovetails into, and Starsky, I got your message. I actually can't. The only thing that can, I'll have to fix this, but right now the only media that I can put into the show has to come to me through Discord. So, and that's just because silly me, I didn't like set that up, and we'll blame Titan. You had mentioned misinformation, and there's two, I think, significant problems. One is the conditioning of Russian people to just do whatever they're told and to parrot whatever they're told to parrot. But the other problem is what seems to me to be probably the largest single misinformation campaign in human history, and it's been going on for a very long time, and it's a different kind of war than anything we've seen, and it's been, I think, far more effective than most people realize, and I'm not entirely sure how you combat it. So having said all that, Operator Starsky, you were mentioning this earlier, and so I'd like to talk to you about this. What is the project that you have been working on since last we spoke?
Oh my God. First of all, we established a propaganda study institute specifically for this purpose, combating Russian propaganda in Europe and in future possibly in the United States as well, and creating mechanisms of fighting this propaganda for, like, on the level of governments, because it's crucial, because governments should be interested and they should be participating in fighting Russian disinformation, not only Russian, of course. And currently I am working on reverse engineering Russian disinformation, because thanks to different investigations conducted by security agencies and journalists, we have quite a lot of data that should be processed, and we are trying to understand exactly how Russian disinformation is being created and shared around the world. And the thing is, it's not just about how it's work, it's about the details, about the target audiences. It's about the KPIs that the goals that Russian agencies that introduce and that execute this propaganda and disinformation that they create for themselves, that they aim at. So it's a really complicated process, but I believe that we are one step closer to finding, a cure against Russian disinformation and propaganda, because this data that we have right now provides us with extremely, extremely interesting insights. For example, Russians are aiming at increasing the level of nuclear hysteria on the West. What does it tell us? First of all, it tells us that Russians find this nuclear hysteria that currently exists, or fear of people towards possible use of nuclear weapons on the territory of United States or Europe. They find this fear not big enough. That is something that doesn't satisfy Russians. They want the world to fear them more. They want the world to fear their nuclear weapons more. And they want you to talk about it more. Why is that? Because apparently people on the West, people in the democratic countries, don't really consider a nuclear threat a threat. For a very obvious reason, because Russians apparently don't want to destroy European or American cities where the kids of rich Russians live and work, right? Like, it's obvious. Another thing is, of course, creating tensions inside societies, inside democracies, creating tensions between different social groups, sowing discord. And one insight that I had recently was that basically all sorts of Russian propaganda only aimed at spreading negative information, spreading negative messages. It's about thriving on suffering. If we analyze all sorts of pro-Russian bloggers, opinion makers, all sorts of talking heads on the screen that support Russian terrorism, they only thrive on suffering and hate. This is like the only type of content they create. Russian propaganda can create positivity. They can create some positive content, of course, but it takes tremendous efforts. For example, that movie about that piece of Russian propaganda called Russians at War. Of course, it took them quite a while to write a scenery, to write the narratives, make this movie, etc., etc. It is not reasonable for them, and of course they don't need any positive narratives to be shared in the Western society, because, like, what's the reason? They don't want us to be happy. They want us to suffer. So based on those insights and based on the research that I'm currently working at, we are one step closer, I would say, to finding this immunity against Russian disinformation. And one thing that I can tell you right now is that Russians want society to be toxic. Russians want society to be hateful and violent, and the reason to withstand it is completely the opposite, is to be less toxic, is to be less violent, is to be more tolerant and united. This is the Russian main target, to destroy all that. So we have a lot of data to think about. And hopefully in the future, I will present some results. Today, in like 2 hours, I will have a stream dedicated to, I would say, initial results of my investigation research, to let people understand what kind of people they are. And I'm talking about the audience that is subscribed mostly to pro-Ukrainian channels, to pro-Ukrainian opinion makers, people supportive towards Ukraine, etc. I want to show them why they are so inspiring to me personally, and why we should I would say, keep fighting and spread proper messages that would destroy Russian disinformation and make us more immune to it. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the viewers in just 2 hours and 15 minutes when we will talk about it.
And we've dropped the link to that, and I'll also make sure that that gets into the description. But now wait a minute. I mean, we have freedom of the press in the West. Isn't that, I mean, we've got newspapers that report the truth. What harm can Russian disinformation really do outside of Russia?
It's really easy. The messages that they spread in the Western society, they're directed at destabilizing countries, causing violence, death, horror, and all kinds of problems for democratic societies that are based on the law of, rule-based societies. And that is one thing. Another thing is that there's no freedom of speech in Russia. Therefore, whatever they share outside of Russia is not freedom of speech. That is literally informational warfare produced by Kremlin and pushed into French society, German society, American society through paid influencers and paid bloggers, paid talking heads on the screen. And Tim Pool is one of the examples, but unfortunately he's not the only one. There's approximately 26,000 influencers around the world that are ready to work with Russians. And approximately 1/5 of those influencers are located in the U.S.
Okay. So that sounds like a lot. Could you explain to me who is Dean Pool and why is he significant in this? Why is he a significant example of just what we're talking about when we're talking about combating misinformation?
Tim Pool was known as extremely anti-Ukrainian commentator, let's call him this way, on Tenet Media. That is Tennessee-based YouTube channel that united 6 commentators. And they were basically hired by Russia Today through fake identity that would invest in this independent media, like investing into independent media so they would produce content raises questions about its independency, of course. But that's exactly what they did. And over the time they were hired by Russia Today, that is, again, it's sanctioned. They produced a lot of content. They shared approximately 840 different types of content, videos that were given to them directly by Russians, ethnic Russians sitting in Moscow and creating content for Americans to spread in their society and brainwash American people. So Tim Pool was an extremely successful dude because he would earn approximately $100,000 weekly per video, where he would scream that Ukraine is the biggest enemy of the United States and Americans should apologize to Russians, etc., etc. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, after receiving more than $9 million from Russians, they stopped those activities because investigation started, and it turned out that the Russians that were hiring them, they violated the Act of Registered Foreign Agents, and they also violated the legislation against the money laundering. So question number one is whether Tim Pool knew that he was working for Russians, which, whatever the answer is, Russians still suck, because on one hand, the founders of Tenet Media, literally 1 year before the Russian invasion, they already worked with Russia Today directly. They were sharing all kinds of content and commentaries. They published approximately 200 different types of content for Russia Today, knowing that they're working for Russia Today. It was voluntarily and been beneficial for them. Did they know that they were working for Russians when they were literally pushed pro-Russian content on a daily basis? Absolutely zero information that would objectively reflect what happens in Ukraine. Ukrainian gains. No, they were literally pushed, pushing all kinds of Russian narratives. That would raise a question in my head, of course, if I was Tim Pool. But anyways.
Also, and I want.
Oh yes, please. Another thing is, of course, Russians do this on purpose. What I'm talking about is they conceal their identity, of course, because they don't want you to know that you work for them directly, and of course they keep it a secret. For the case when you decide to quit, they will say, "No, Tavarish, you cannot do that, because otherwise we will expose you as our asset." So that is another thing, and generally they do that a lot. If you are being recruited by the KGB, by the FSB, in most cases you will never even recognize it. So that's another thing. So in both cases, whatever the answer is, they suck. Tim Pool sucks as well.
Couldn't agree more, and I do want to get Lance in on this because he knows a great deal more about this than I do. But I do want to point out, so what it sounds like we're hearing is, if you're in the U.S., where I think there's this notion that our free speech makes us invulnerable to propaganda, what they're actually doing is putting, in this case that we've discovered, and it looks like you're telling me that there's a lot more, they took, say, about $10 million and found YouTubers who already had ideologies that were extreme, already were really unpleasant people, and deliberately said, "Hey, we like your content. We think you know what you're talking about. We're going to give you more to provide more content. And by the way, if you could even push the gas on that a little bit and do, we'll get you loads of money." And let's assume for a second they didn't know. So what you have is stooges who are doing the work of the Russian government. And at a time when the U.S. is more divided than at any time since the Civil War, you have a huge amount of money going towards making us even more divided by amplifying voices that are the most extreme in the U.S. And this is just the U.S. This is also, I mean, you gave a U.S. example, which I appreciate because we're out of the U.S., but they're doing this in the EU. There's some indication in Brexit too. Is that right? And I want to get both of you in on this.
I think one of the problems is that this isn't to denigrate what Starsky's trying to do, because he's dead on accurate, but there's a second side to the problem that we tend to ignore. And it's all this free speech stuff, which again I support, but there are questions that we need to address. For example, what if you have a person who owns a large media empire who has gotten loans from Russian banks, unconnected with what's being said over the airwaves of his media empire? Technically speaking, this owner/publisher isn't telling his reporters what to say on air, not writing the script for them, but it's one of those, everybody in the food chain knows which side the bread is buttered on. So you don't say certain things which you know will piss off the boss. And so we're getting that shaping our opinions from media organizations, which we tend to consider more centrists as opposed to more extreme. The stuff the Russians tend to do is influencing the extreme to get even more extreme, but we're losing track of the fact that even the moderate side is getting pressure because of all the influence the Russians have used to create targets of interest that they make friends with and help. So it's not direct attacks on the system, it's an indirect attack on the system, if you will.
Yeah, and it works absolutely perfectly and effectively. Look, there's, I would say, 10 pro-Ukrainian YouTubers, like more or less known, okay? Pro-Ukrainian YouTube channels. Why do we need more? Like, generally it's 10, it's normal. They're not supposed to be 100, right? Because it's unnatural. If there's 100 sources, speaking about Ukraine, then it raises questions, maybe they're paid, But it's absolutely the situation that we see, for example, in American society, in European internet. It's absolutely the same. There's hundreds and hundreds of different channels. A lot of them, of course, they don't have a lot of subscribers, but they're pushing this information and, disinformation. And of course, the Russians that produce and execute this disinformation on the West, they also monitor something they call anti-influencers. They monitor less than 2,000 people around the world. Again, majority of them located in the United States that fight against Russian disinformation. Again, not a lot of them have a lot of subscribers, but they're active in Facebook, in Twitter. Some of them are active on TikTok and YouTube. And they monitor and research what those guys are doing because they want to understand the flaws in their Russian-created strategy, which is, again, absolutely proper thing to do if you're a proper strategist and communication specialist. That's exactly what you have to do on a daily basis. So that's just one interesting point. And speaking of people who don't want to say things in order not to piss off their bosses, that's basically the Trump's rhetorics, because there were absolutely no cases when Trump would condemned Russians for killing Ukrainians. There were absolutely no cases when Trump would call Russians to stop invading Ukraine, stop killing people. There were absolutely no cases when Trump would say Russians are bombing Ukrainian cities. What Trump says, and we can hear that in his recent speech about Ukraine that is gone. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not aware about it, but what we can hear is that Ukrainian houses are being destroyed, Ukrainian crops are like being burned and things like that. Does it happen on its own? I mean, like, does it happen because Ukrainians cannot do anything, their houses fall down on their own and stuff? No, because there is somebody who does all that. But because of rules of communications, he will never call the people who do that. He will never say Russians kill Ukrainians. No, it's forbidden because he doesn't want to piss off the boss and because he doesn't want to form the appropriate or proper image in the heads of people who listen to him. If you don't say that Russians are the reason of the war in Ukraine, then in the heads of his electors, Russian will keep being, those good guys with beautiful souls, etc. But they will never understand the reason why there's a war in Ukraine. And one of the things that Trump said recently in that very speech, he said that the only reason this happens in Ukraine is Zelensky. What the hell? It's like, Oh my God. The girl was raped because she was wearing a short skirt. You know, blame the victim. So that is extremely, extremely outrageous. Today, I thought seriously about buying myself a bottle of tequila after I listened to that extremely ridiculous shit by a unfortunately candidate for American presidents. It's insane. But that is exactly the case when we can see that he doesn't want to say specific things in order not to piss off a person who supports him. I have deep criticism towards Kamala Harris. I have deep criticism towards Joe Biden because I honestly believe that they don't do enough for Ukraine to win the war. They don't do enough. And Ukraine, which is very important, sacrifice its security. We Ukrainians sacrificed our safety in 1994 and gave up nuclear weapons. So, for the sake of good relations with the West, and not only with the West, with Russia as well, we sacrificed our safety, and now we don't have it. Now we have a war, and our allies don't do enough. So we had that safety re-established in Ukraine. That's why I will keep criticizing Kamala Harris. I will keep criticizing Biden. I will keep criticizing everybody who doesn't do enough according to the memorandum, according to the agreements. But at the same time, Kamala Harris has enough bravery to call Putin for what he is, which is a criminal and terrorist, while Donald Trump never does that. He doesn't do it because he doesn't want to, it's improper to ruin relationships with the terrorists. No, he doesn't do it because all Russian resources, all Russian infrastructure of both farms, fake accounts, fake people, all kinds of paid influencers, etc., are supporting Trump. Therefore, Trump would never agree to lose this support because he understands that he needs it. And another question was whether Russians doing it behind his back, or he asked them about it. So it's another question that I don't know the answer to, but it's a very interesting point.
I'm going to mildly disagree, and I do want to hear Lance's answer to this, but I do want to ask Lance a question real quick.
Sure.
Lance, in your experience, if you knew someone who was running a business and he got, in order to save himself and get out of bankruptcy and be able to continue this business, got hundreds of millions in free, really genuinely free loans that weren't even expected to be paid back from an intermediary, say Deutsche Bank, that was getting that money from some unknown organization like, say, perhaps the Bank of Russia, which by being the Bank of Russia is actually Putin's own pocketbook. Do you think that would influence said candidate, and can you think of any candidates that may fit that description that are running for president today?
I don't mind dealing in hypotheticals, but once you start progressing down the road too far, the hypothetical becomes absurdist. Clearly, that's where we ventured in here. Oh, wait a minute. No, you're almost describing an actual situation. How could I have missed it?
Yes. So I suspect the fact that
but I
Trump
would go
owes
further.
a lot of money. Please do.
Oh, yeah, I would go further because it's not just Trump. It's many of the people in high positions in the GOP, but worse, they're ones on the Democratic side that have got the same issue. The Russians understand how to do this, to set someone up to become a person of interest, not an agent. They're not directly working for them, but they know how to use that kind of pressure to influence people to be more favorable to them. So you get
I don't,
somebody
Don Jr., what you're talking about, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, McConnell's a perfect case in point where, they got something like $750 million to building an aluminum processing plant in his state.
Now that was Daporeska, I think his name is. He is he has been sanctioned. He is one of the Russian oligarchs. Mitch McConnell voted to override the sanctions on Desperaka, or however you pronounce his name, so that he could help do business in the U.S. Where did he choose to do business? In a failed power plant in McConnell's own district. Well, in his state. He's a senator, so the entire state is his district. They rebuilt that, and that was at a time when he was about to lose a general election for senator. So it seems arguable that he's been working for the Russians in that sense. Don Jr. is a good example of someone who received a lot of, didn't receive pressure. He was requesting pressure.
But Nick, the problem is there are enough reasonable doubt cutouts there that you can't prosecute people for this kind of thing. We all know what's going on. But the way the laws are written and the way the court systems work, nobody's ever going to get held accountable for this stuff. So the real issue, when you boil it down to the essentials, is that we need to change the way the laws are written and how they deal with people. And that's one of the problems, is that, some guy in the inner city who's caught selling cigarettes without a license immediately goes to jail for 10 years, whereas opposed to some billionaire is actively working with the Russians, he gets a firm finger wag. Don't do it again, Mitch. The legal system is not structured to really facilitate justice. It's in position to protect the rights and the property and the wealth of the oligarchy.
And that is one of the reasons I'm so excited about what Starsky is doing, because I think a better understanding of this could lead to us trying to maybe prosecute people involved. I did want to know if either of you recognize this person. Her name is Maria Bostana. She is the head of the equivalent of the NRA in Russia. Her office was established, and the NRA in Russia was established shortly before she came to the U.S., where she detailed its long 50-year history of promoting that all Russians have a right to guns. Now, the last person to promote that genuinely found himself falling out of a 23-story window. So how did she get away with it? Well, that's a very good question. This is her with, at the time, presidential candidate. Well, he was in the primaries, so he was a primary candidate, Bobby Jindal, who...
I need to go pee.
This is her with Bobby Jindal.
Sorry, guys, I have to interrupt this. I will be back in just 1 minute. I'm real sorry.
No worries.
Nick,
take your time.
I sent you a message. I have a technical issue.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Got it.
I mean, so that woman is yet another case of how they do this. You get somebody to create a person of interest that you have some sort of sway over. It doesn't mean that you've got compromise on them. It doesn't mean that you're paying them off. It just means that you have a relationship where you can talk to them and say, well, we would prefer it do this way, and we might be able to help you downstream on some other project, of course. And I think that's the kind of stuff that's going on all the time that we don't even think about. And so it's lost in the background noise of American, European, whatever politics. It's global.
This is her with Don Jr. You can also find her with Mitch McConnell and any number of other... I hit the wrong with back. And she was finally discovered to be a foreign agent, and she was expelled from the country. She is now in the Duma of one of the local regions. That was misinformation. I think Russians hacked our stream. Okay, no, let me rephrase that. No, you know what? I think I'm not even going to bother. I'm just we'll.
Don't go for the low-hanging fruit.
Don't go for the low-hanging fruit, and let's try not to get demonetized for our 6 millionth time in a row. I think what I think we're going to do is actually, I think we're going to start to wrap it up. I do want to ask Starsky when he comes back a few more questions. I don't know if you have any questions, but I want to make sure you've got a chance to ask him a few questions. I want to certainly know what his short, mid, and long-term goals are. You know, that's a common question I ask, because I always ask you that question. But you're like, I'm not. As soon as you say I'm not going to make a projection, I was like, great, because I'm only going to ask you to make 3. You know, and we'll see where he goes. But I really do think that this is and to answer the question that was put in the live chat earlier. Yes, this is a genocide. This is irrefutably a genocide. It meets all the requirements of a genocide. And if there is such a thing as a legitimate Russian channel, I will debate that with anybody at any time, anywhere. This is absolutely a genocide and needs to be treated as such. And it's absurdist to think that you could call it anything else aside from the barbaric tactics that are being used, aside from the deliberate obliteration of the Ukrainian people, aside from all but endorsing the rape of Ukrainian women because they need Russian blood in the population. It's genocide. Period. End of discussion. Yep, I'll debate anyone on that one anytime. So, any final thoughts before we kick it off to final thoughts from Starsky, who is having technical issues?
I think in the short term, we're going to see a continuation of what we've been seeing the past couple of months. I think the Russians will continue to push where they can. The Ukrainians will continue to push where they can. But weather is going to very soon become a major factor on things, if it hasn't already. I'll be honest, I haven't checked the weather reports, but you get big rains in the fall, and that turns everything into mush. So there's going to be very limited operational opportunity while that period is in effect. When the winter hits, it opens things back up, but winter presents its own problems in terms of just operating, depending on how cold it is. So we may see stuff developing. I don't know. The concern I have is that when that mud hits in the near term, it's going to set it's going to calm things down at the front, and that gives the Russians the opportunity to start digging in around Kiev and such. And as we've seen repeatedly, conducting these frontal assaults into heavily fortified mined defensive lines, it's almost a pointless endeavor. So that means what has to happen for the Ukrainians, or the Russians for that matter, to make any progress in their next offensive, they have to find a point in the line somewhere that's weak, that hasn't had an opportunity to get good defensive positions put in, and then you hit there. So I think we're going to see things calming down across the front in terms of ground operations. Now, I suspect at the same time we're going to see things starting to intensify in terms of the aerial bombardment campaigns. That's going to be a combination of the fact that there are now relaxation on the use of some weapons for the Ukrainians. They can start striking targets deeper in. They have their own production lines now going, so they can start sending their drones in. The Russians, on the other hand, are looking at problems getting the materials they need to produce all those kind of weapons in the same quantities they've been using them. So I suspect we're going to see the level of their aerial bombardment slightly tapering off. So anyway, those are my predictions for the upcoming months.
All right. So as we start to wrap this up, I do want to address Kevin Woodridge. Bustina, I'm going to have to rememorize the name. It's been so long. Was trading sex for intelligence, U.S. intelligence, and it worked. I mean, It was. She's one of those that like we've been wanting to do a deep dive on for quite some time because of just how far she got into American politics and how much influence she had. But it's there's, if real life could take a break for a couple of weeks and we could sit and like do the dive on that would be great. But it's like every time we think we have time to do it, it's like, oh, you'll never guess what Trump just did and how many more indictments he's got against him. I'm like, okay, she's if she's taking pictures with Bobby Jindal, she's already in news terms. It's ancient history. Unfortunately, it's not because they're still doing it, but. So, Operator Starsky, I wanted to ask you, what are your goals for what you're doing? And I in 3 stages, please, sort of your short-term goals. You mentioned one that you're going to be doing tonight and some information you're going to be releasing, but also your mid-term goals. What is it that are the projects you're working on now, and your long-term goals in terms of where you see this being a couple of years from
now? First of all, it's helping and motivating people to be more immune to Russian propaganda, because we already passed the stage when debunking Russian fakes was enough. Fact checking is not enough, and debunking Russian fakes is not enough at this point. We have to do more. We have to come up with strategy, and we had to do it the day before yesterday, actually. So this is something that I'm trying to understand right now, because we have a lot of data and we have a lot of knowledge to make strategies, but I need help from people that are smarter than me. That's why I'm currently trying to get in touch with different academics, different practicing communications specialists who would help me with this, who would help me to understand how to use the data that we have in order to reach the goals. And the goals are simple, is to help people be less toxic, help people to be more motivated, and help them to be immune against Russian disinformation. That is something I'm working on. My goal is to come up with the communication strategy for people involved in fighting Russian disinformation, and the main idea is to help them deliver this information in a more effective way and motivate people, unite people, and help them stay motivated, stay positive, stay united, because toxicity is Russia's main weapon at this moment. And we can say that from looking at what happens around the world in the United States and European countries.
Well, I think I can safely say on behalf of myself and on behalf of those of us on In Time, if there's anything we can do to help, all you have to do is just text, and I will force Titan to do it. I mean, I'll help happily. Commander, do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. Other than what I always try to end my participation in your and other places is, please keep pressure on your elected officials. Call, write, email. Just let them know that Ukraine is important to you, and you want to see the U.S., whatever country they're from, continue to provide support to them. It's time of need and struggle.
So, all joking aside, as a news show, we could not appreciate what you're doing more, Starsky. I think education is the silver bullet to everything. Want to solve global warming? It's education. Want to try to improve the economy? It's education. Want to get better medications, better antibiotics? It's education. And if you want to try to fight Russian disinformation, it's education, and that's what you're doing now. welcome brother to the family of educators and people who are trying to stop misinformation. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming back on. We're delighted to see you. We did get 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐚𝐬, who just became a member, has also gifted 5 memberships. So thank you very much for that, and we really do appreciate that support. And we look forward to, I think, let's see, this is I think taking up our downtime slot for tonight. We'll see, but at any rate, we've got downtime, which is just Commander and I usually shooting the shit about various topics, and sometimes we bring on other guests. We've got a few other shows. Again, join the Discord, check it out, and see what you do. And if you think that what we do is worth endorsing, we really could always use your help, whether that's just a like and a subscribe, or Patreon or a membership. It all does help. Thank you all very much. Thank you once again, Lance and Operator Starsky, and we look forward to seeing you guys once again very soon. So, oh, hold on. Now I have a technical issue. So I'm going to need 1 second. Having just given this rousing, it's just going to be it. There's always something. All right, I think we're done. I have to fire our producer at some point. It's just got to get rid of the producer. All right. I think he's the same guy who produces for the shills, to be quite honest. Thank you all for joining us, and do check out Starsky's channel. Check out his show tonight, which we have dropped a link both to his channel and to tonight's show. And the shills will also be talking tonight, so why don't you also check that out as well. Thank you all. See you soon.